Like many, my first handheld system was the Nintendo Game Boy. I fell in love with the thing and took it everywhere I went. It was hard to see, difficult to do on road trips unless you had that weird kind of light thing, but it was still absolutely a blast to play the games on it. So for this week's ranking, we're going to look at the 5 Nintendo Game Boy launch titles and rank them from the worst to the best. It's funny that Nintendo actually launched several systems with a tennis game, the NES, the Virtual Boy, and the Nintendo Game Boy. And while it was basically just a slightly updated version from the NES counterpart, I always liked the character sprites included in the game, Mario of course still the referee, and you had 4 difficulties to take on an opponent in a 3-set match. It wasn't anything particularly spectacular, but tennis was still a fun playing, well, tennis game on the handheld system. The other of the 2 sports titles that launched with the Game Boy was baseball. Once again, an updated kind of version of baseball that launched with the NES, but this time around you actually had Mario and Luigi on the 2 teams that added a little bit of extra flair to the game, but it was still just a basic baseball title. It moved a bit quicker than its NES counterpart, and I ended up playing a lot of games on road trips, though with the battery life I was only able to get so many in before it would end up dying. In the end, there wasn't a ton of great baseball games on the Game Boy, and this one was just okay. I like breakout style of games, and Alleyway, which launched with the Game Boy, was actually a pretty fun one. It actually starred Mario as the person who controlled the ship, and it wasn't as flashy as a game like Arkanoid, but it still provided the ball-bouncing, brick-breaking action that you like in these style of games, and provided a nice little distraction. It's not the best of this type of genre, but it was still a pretty fun game that launched with the Game Boy. There was basically 2 heavy hitters when the Game Boy launched, and the game that came bundled with the system was Tetris. This was the must-have game, and people went nuts being able to finally play the really addictive puzzle game of Tetris on the go. It was also the first of the games to actually allow for link cable capabilities, so you could hook it up with a friend and actually play against them in Tetris. The gameplay is rather simplistic and easy to start playing, but of course, difficult to master. It is still an addictive and very fun game to play to this day, and the Game Boy version stands the test of time as one of the funnest that the Game Boy provided. The only one of the Japanese launch games for the Game Boy that didn't make it to North America was Yakuman. This is a Mahjong game, so it's not really a surprise it didn't come over to North America, but it was actually made by Nintendo themselves. The character himself did end up making it as a sticker in Super Smash Bros. Brawl years later, and there was a sequel or follow-up for the Nintendo DS that actually featured Mario characters as both the playable and the opponents that you ended up facing. Mahjong is pretty fun if you can get into it, of course, but there's no real surprise why this title didn't end up coming here. By far my favorite of the Nintendo Game Boy launch games is Super Mario Land. This game is still a fun platformer to play to this day, and was different from the NES versions, featuring Sarsaland instead of the Mushroom Kingdom, Princess Daisy instead of Princess Peach, the bouncing ball weapon, which was actually pretty fun instead of the fireball, as well as the really awesome scrolling shooting levels with the submarine and the airplane at the end. It had some fun boss encounters along the way to change things up, and even though it was only 4 worlds with 3 levels each, they were all different from one another, and it provided just enough challenge and enough length to be great for road trips. Overall, Super Mario Land is fantastic and one of my favorite Mario games of all time. So there you have it, the launch for the Nintendo Game Boy. Which of these games is your personal favorite? Would you rank them in a different order? And what is your favorite Game Boy game of all time? There are a lot of great games that ended up coming out during the course of the Game Boy's lifespan. Anyway guys, let me know down in the comments also what other countdowns you want to see me do, as well as what systems you want to see me cover in the future. But anyway, that'll wrap up this ranking video. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.